Hello and welcome to TRIGGERnometry. I'm Francis Foster.
I'm Konstantin Kisin.
And this is the show for you if you're bored of people arguing on the internet over subjects they know nothing about. At TRIGGERnometry, we don't pretend to be the experts, we ask the experts.
Our fantastic expert guest this week is Tony Sewell, who's the founder of Generating Genius, which is a charity that helps inner city kids get to top universities here in the UK. Tony, welcome to TRIGGERnometry.
Oh, thanks for having me.
It's so good to have you here.
Yeah.
The question we always like to ask at the beginning is, how are you where you are? What's been your journey through life?
Well, I suppose, my journey is an interesting one because it's, I think it sort of defines really for me what's happening now, and I look back at that past and see a kind of a line going in. And I think the line was always, how do I kind of disrupt what is given for me? So, for example, I was given a crap school, crap secondary school, where all of us were expected. Well, what happened was quite interesting. The white kids in the school went and got jobs, usually with their uncles or whatever, or friends, and they had those connections. So it seemed to me that's quite interesting how they got work. The black boys in the school, well, we had a harder time. I mean, a lot of us were unemployed, but and really the way out for us, this is a boys' school, was harder. I would admit that. This was back in the 70s, yeah? Mm. And I think that, I think for me, the route then became almost, how do I now kind of redefine myself in this interesting situation where nothing was really happening. I remember I used to bunk off school basically to go to the library. Because that was really to try and educate myself.
You're such a rebel, Tony.
That was my rebellious thing, going down into the library and trying to get some things. But my mother was quite smart on this one. So what she did was and there was three of us, my brother and my sister, and she packed us off quite early to an Anglican church, you know. It wasn't high Anglican, it was just another one. And it was, an Anglican Church of England, and in that very middle class setting, all white setting. And so we just went in there, and we were the token black kids in that church. But they were really nice people, and we did nice things. But what was interesting was that it changed our perception, because suddenly we had I think I always look at this for anybody as a sort of adolescent growing up, your peer group is going to define a lot of who you are and how you work, you know, and so in a sense we were suddenly given this new peer group of middle class kids, and they went off to university and they came back in the summer, and so they were our new friends, and so that's what you do now, because in our schools nobody went to university, but for us that was a change. All right, I want to be like my friends, so I better go off to university. So we all said, right, well, how are we going to do this? Because we've got to go to these crap schools. How are we going to get there? And so we just, I suppose, but it's quite interesting that didn't seem to be that difficult. And I say that because so some of this stuff is about motivation, is about that drive to do something is there. Obviously, you do need to have some of the stuff in place, but to be socially mobile, a lot of it, and that's why I began to think about social mobility, that a lot of it was quite intrinsic, yeah? And so therefore that set us off on that journey, or me on that journey, to sort of go off to university, and I think ever since then I've always had a tension between almost like middle class people trying to sort of work out what I am and who I am, and that kind of desire to do something different. So, for example, if you, I remember going to, I'm also defined by my Jamaican background as well. My parents were from Jamaica, and all of that was very important in the 70s for us, but it wasn't the sole thing that defined me. You know, I had another part of me which was, I don't know, just another part of me. I love classical music, for example. I love Bach and things like that. And I remember going to the South Bank, and I don't know if you remember this band called Visa. I don't remember. That's an African band, and they were playing on one corner, and then they were in the Purcell rooms. Bach was playing in the other. I got my ticket to go to the Purcell room, and I remember the guy at the door actually blocking me from the Bach concert, saying that you got to go over to the office because that's where the black people are.
Yeah.
He didn't actually say that, but he just said, "You wouldn't be in there," because what it might have been, something was going to harm me if I was going to, because I was going to be I was about 17 then, and something was gonna harm me if I was gonna go in there and listen to Bach music, being the only black. But I've got to go and jump up with all the other black people at Visa. That's where you had to, and if you like, that kind of thing was continually kind of you go in as and this just, I mean, one of the reasons why I'm adamant about this is that I had a recent interview with the Sunday Times, which I don't want to slam the journalist, but I mean, it was a good interview.
He's about to slam the journalist.
Now, we have some offices in central London. It just happened that my PA, she booked an office which was, I mean, the three of us are quite comfortable here. I mean, it was a very small room, and she brought her intern in there. So there was three of us in the room, and we were talking, and I was relaxed. As you can see, I've got a South London accent. I'm hopefully I'm fairly articulate with it. I'm comfortable with my accent. I love my South London background.
I've got a South London accent, and I'm far less articulate than you, mate. So you crack on, you're fine.
Anyway, when I read the piece after we had done this, her thing was, I'm 6'2". I must admit, I don't know if I'm that kind of intimidating. Anyway, her first comment was, we're in this cramped room with Tony, who has a massive frame and a raspberry Croydon accent, It's kinda, and that was the first definition of. So I was kind of wondering. And it reminds me of the scene. Did you ever see Mel Brooks's Blazing Saddles? Do you know that film? Blazing Saddles?
Yeah,
do you know?
Yeah, I know. I haven't seen it in a while, but
it's in the scene. There's a sheriff there's a black sheriff who comes into town. Mel Brooks is very good at sort of usurping things, and the sheriff comes into. They've killed the existing sheriff, so a new one comes in, but. This is sort of like in the backwoods of Western. And of course, the new sheriff is a black guy who's coming in town. And so he gets up on the stage and starts addressing the audience and then puts his hand just slightly down to where his dick is. And then suddenly all the women go, as if something terrible was going to happen. Yeah. And I mean, that kind of scene reminded me of that because I was what was wrong with her? I mean, and then, of course, all my friends, and it's quite interesting, they missed the article and they just went straight for that to say, well, Tony, what was wrong with this woman? I wrote to her and I said to her, look, I didn't understand. You detracted from the other bits in the piece by just saying that. And she said, oh, no, we have to always set a context for our guests, The other piece.
So in this case, the context was that you're black. Is that that's the context?
Intimidating. And also there was a little kind of working class thing, which I think all working class people get. I wore a nice suit, in there because I wanted us to get a nice sharp shot for our charity, and I had some patterned shoes. I thought they looked kind of sharp, so I was wearing those as well. And then she pointed to, he was wearing this posh suit and patterned shoes. And it was also like, it reminds me of the thing in Only Fools and Horses where Rodney's always, the drinks thing. He has a flash drink, as if working class people are trying to be posh. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So it's kind of slight that kind of, and that's the dual thing you get. And it's a very English thing, You got on the other hand, you're a black man, and they're always obsessed with your size and whatever. And on the other hand, there's this whole kind of class thing about your accent. And what that tells you about your accent, constantly obsessed with it, which doesn't actually, and I could be wrong, I don't see it happening in a lot of other countries. I think it's a very English thing that we do with accents. And I can see people continually struggling with that at times, and even those people who have made it, you can see them always referring back to that kind of tension. So that was an interesting thing. But then, who cares? I did quite well. I got CBE from Prince Charles. He was all right. He's got a funny accent.
That's the most South London thing I've ever heard in my life. I got a CBE from Prince Charles. He's all right.
So things went up. So that's sort of part of the journey. And then so that's it.
Well, let's talk about generating genius, because you've talked about being stereotyped and what you're just talking about there, but actually you're someone who talks extensively about the fact that in terms of educational outcomes and things like that, it's not racism that prevents people from advancing, but it's a lack of values or lack of fathers in the home. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, and it still is, even though, I tell that story because it's not that I'm here to sort of cry about racism or about worries me. I actually think that we can talk about that and we can go over that, but you accept the realities that the society has problems, but it's not going to hold you back. And that's my mother's attitude, and that was how we. But what I find is, in the balance of things, I still would say that what we do need is this sort of almost a kind of. A kind of sense to tell young people that they've got I call it the agency, to actually kind of get over this. It's not insurmountable. You shouldn't have to face it, but on the other hand, it's certainly not as bad as it was in the 70s and 80s. So there's actually progress in the society. One of the problems in all of this is that if you don't say that, then young people get locked in to a world and they feel they can't get out of it. Hence the title Generating Genius, because if you surround poor people or people who are oppressed with this sort of sense that they can do, so genius is always kind of a sense of it's out there, but anybody can become a genius. Really. You just have to put the things together, the opportunities, and then you can fly. So what I did is I also wanted to prove to myself that formula was true. And so what I did is I found the group that was black boys who were actually underachieving the worst in the society at the moment at that time, and it's improved to a certain extent now in terms of school outcomes and exclusions. And I wanted to set them a task to say, right, can I get a group all the way through from the poorest backgrounds all the way through to, say, Imperial College or Oxford University, and let's not do an easy subject like we did English. Let's do some sciences, stuff that's not associated with them. Okay, right. And then there is a sense, and I say this as it pervades the society as well, that black boys really are not that bright, really. I mean, you even hear it from Watson saying, not really that bright. They basically best just doing a bit of DJing and stuff like that, but they're not really belong in the laboratory discovering stuff, So let's find the hardest thing, the thing that isn't even associated with them, and let's put them on that track and see what happens. So it was almost like a laboratory experiment, really, for myself. And I found we started with 10. And then we increased it to 100. And there were certain prerequisites around it. Yes, they had to be bright. Yeah, we knew that. And they had to have an interest in science. But they had to be the first in their family to university, dirt poor backgrounds, and certainly none of their schools sent anybody to university. In fact, more of their schools were sending them to jail than university.
Wow.
Yeah? So that was the kind of setup we had. And I got them at 14. And then really, I just worked with them. And a part of looking back now, I look back at that 100, and I would say the vast majority of them now are at top universities. They're in our alumni. In fact, last night, a couple of nights ago, we had a reception for those ones who came when they were 14, now they're 24. So they've gone, and the program, how it works is you stay with us from 14 to the point that you're at university, and we work with you in the out of school space, in holidays, or etc. Just doing lots and lots of sciences. So I was like the Pied Piper. I'd have this group of black boys running around Imperial College, Cambridge. Now what I did is I used all my connections that I'd had from my journey. Because I just know a lot of people in that sense, because I just go everywhere, and everybody at that point wanted to help. So it wasn't as if there was nothing really stopping it happening. You know, all they needed was somebody in the middle to facilitate it. And I think that that's the thing in England. What's happening is that it's not that nobody wants to do anything for poor people or nobody wants to do anything for, it's just that we can't seem to connect. We have a very difficult way of doing this. Somehow stuff's over here, poor people are over here, and no one's in the middle doing the link. It's not as simple as that, I know, but it's some of it is just about that, yeah? And that can be for a number of reasons. I think it's a lack of understanding about what the expectations, that in fact what you can do is you can put some, so for example, some of the universities, some of the colleges genuinely probably didn't think that if you came from a poor part of Brixton in the 70s, 80s, you could get to Oxford. They probably, they didn't understand. So they wouldn't go for that. Well, and then, of course, the other worst thing is that those people already in there don't think they can get there, right? And that's worse, really, in some ways. So you have this equation of nobody's going to, because nobody wants to, they don't want to get, they don't think they can get there, or should, and they don't want them to come.
Yeah. It's what Anura Bevin said about poverty of ambition in the working classes. Because it's like you said, if you're not surrounded by people who are aspiring to do that, then why would you aspire to do it?
And we've got a concept called People Like Me, which is really good. It's just a simple kind of thing of bringing the, so that alumni is quite powerful. So you imagine our new cohort of little kids now waiting, and they can see that lot that have achieved. Once the cycle starts going, it perpetuates itself.
Well, it sounds like an amazing thing that you're doing, Tony, but from your Sunday Times piece, what you're talking about there is the fact that you can't seem to get the politicians to actually listen to what you're talking about.
I think that where I've kind of not been able to engage this is because I'm adamant that I have not gone down the route of saying that the fault of all this is racism. I think that's really been and there are people who are, it's like the power has been changed. So if I'd gone and started waving the flag and saying, all these boys are oppressed because of systemic racism, I think I would probably get more attention, ironically. But I haven't said that. I've said that it is this thing of the driver of ambition to make it happen. And I don't, honestly think that is an issue. And I also think that there just are people who are just totally hopeless, who should be, they're in positions of authority and power, trying to sort out the fact that working class people are not getting their rightful due. And these are people who run these agencies, and they don't know what they're doing. And honestly, I think that is the case. I see it in terms of universities, I see it in terms of charities, I see it in terms of social agencies. I can keep going around, and I just see a lot of people trying something, but it's not really working. And they scratch, and in the end, it's almost like they say, and this is where it gets really bad. They say, your problems are so complex that they can't be solved. You know what I mean? And I keep hearing that. Oh, the problem, knife crime, it's too complicated. There's too many things that we haven't got any solutions. The mayor says it's going to take 10 years to solve it. Now, so in a sense, the people who can come to the solutions are just not at the table, and I don't know why that is. I mean, maybe we just don't know everybody. I don't know. I mean, but that's been a problem for me, and I try and push myself. I'm not. It's not me alone. I'm thinking that I know other people who should be in there. That place called the House of Lords, for example, where you've got people who are strategically overviewing laws and things like that, but hardly any of them sound or look like me in there, and also. The answers, they're people who are meant to have some of the answers, and they're not really getting it. So in a way, we've got to try and completely redefine. And I think something's happening at the moment with the Brexit, where we're really questioning, and I like that. I like the disruption that we're having at the moment. People say, oh, this is horrible. But what's going on is, I think people are waking up to the fact that the so-called experts, this is it, are not the experts. And that's really what's going on here. They don't know. And they've managed to get in their positions, but mainly because of who they know. And I think that's beginning to change now. And I'd love to see, if I had a chance, just people who do know what they're doing in that position. And politically, it would be different. It wouldn't necessarily be a liberal thing as well. It'd be different people from different backgrounds coming in and really trying to sort this out. So I think that's where it's been stuck.
I mean, you touched on in the article as well about the lack of positive male role models at home. And I remember reading that, and I read that article in the Sunday Times, and I sort of gasped when you said it, because it's an issue that we tiptoe around. I've taught in deprived schools in East London, and a lot of the children that do go on to join gangs, they don't have a father figure at home.
Let me just tell you what's happened in the research sector, in the university, in the discourse that's been happening, in the people that hold almost the power over our knowledge. You would have thought that the issue of boys would have been a key thing. In America and other places, they have looked at this issue. In England, the literature on this is very sparse. There's hardly anything on it. You know, you get some people that we don't understand boys' development. We don't understand what they're doing. Yet our prisons are full of them. Yet they're the ones that are disrupting most of the society, and yet we carry along with this. And I think it's because what's happened is that we've had a kind of guilt reaction in regard to feminism. And I say that because what's actually happening here is that there's a sort of sense that women have been blocked, but they've been blocked by the wrong kind of. It's not these type of men that are really doing the blocking. You know, so in a sense, these poor boys or black boys are getting beaten up really, and it's not them that's really in the way. It's boys from Eton, boys from these are the boys that are really up there doing all the oppression. So the Me Too movement should go after them really. And in a sense, what's actually happening is working class boys and black boys are really at the bottom of the rung here. And their only way of disrupting the society often is by being violent at the bottom. So we've got this kind of mismatch, you see. And I'm all for the Me Too movement, but I think there should be a Me Too movement for black and working class boys and white working class boys. I do think they need, and one of the key elements for them is we need to sort of seriously ask about the family and the home, and not just accept this idea that fathers are allowed to walk away or be thrown out by whoever or the courts or wherever and not have access to those boys.
Why is it important for the boys to have fathers?
Because it's back to this sort of people like me. Let me give you an example and that's where the Caribbean community is a very kind of interesting kind of development. If you look at the way girls are doing now really well in the site. Teenage pregnancy is gone virtually in England. You know, you hardly see it. Those numbers are gone. I mean, basically, we've got a society now where the girls are doing very, very well. University rates for girls are just high, nearly 50-60% of the campuses. The girl will be at home on a Sunday night, seeing her legs between her mum, combing her hair, and they're talking their business, and they're having a great time together because they're doing girl stuff, yeah? And she's got a role model with her mum, and her mother is that identifying figure. The boy, the little boy, can do some of that when he's small, when he's tiny. But there's a point in a boy's life, and it doesn't really matter even if you're homosexual. Your sexuality's got nothing to do with this. There's just a point in a boy's life where he's going to want to push away from that mother figure and find another person. Yeah, usually that looks to be like the father, hopefully. To carry out that kind of intimate work. Now, if the dad isn't there to do that job, he'll find it in other boys. Hence, that's why boys like to go around with each other. And that's what it's just about identifying with people that look like you, and you feel an empathy with that. And I think that's fine. The problem is, the other thing is about boys, and this is where it gets quite controversial, is that biologically, we've got, I don't know if you're left-handed, but right-handed, we've got a strong right arm. And that means that physically we can do a lot of damage. Our ancestors realized that. That strong arm can actually tear to pieces a village. Yeah. So what we've got to do, it's quite interesting. Knife crime is interesting because that's another thing about the right arm. You know, what's that doing? You know, and so what the father does often, and I can see in their interactions with their sons, is that they are like the police force. They come in and they restrain those boys. Yeah. I always remember when you look at the risk taking that a man does with his son. You know, it's very interesting. Going out there, son, you know, especially when they're riding their bikes, you know. It's like, I've seen it all the time. It's a stereotype. Yeah, right. You know, the boy falls off the bike. Get up, come on, son, get up. You just fell off. It's just a little bruise. Yeah, get on with it, you know. And I'm a stereotype. I see the mothers around the boys and kind of, oh, no. And it's kind of like, no, you know, I mean, no. And they get that. They get that difference, yeah? That risk-taking that you want. Go on, boy, get on with it. And actually, to a certain extent, the boys like that. They like that kind of sense of, but they want also somebody there to say no, thus far and no further. And that kind of, my dad used to play it. My dad used to be the sort of silent, he used to be, in my home, my mother used to do, when we had corporal punishment, my mother used to do all the beating in the home, and she used to try her best. And then, if it
beating,
was
she was really good at it. She was practicing every night.
She used to beat whatever. I used to give her a hard time. But then my father was like the nuclear weapon. You know what I mean? So he would be sitting there as the sort of, and you knew that was the kind of almost, you know, that was the kind of thing that held everything, all the thing in play. That if you were referred back up there. That would be a serious, and and you could see there was like a power thing going on, and I just feel that that's with the fathers, that figure of authority that is missing. So therefore, it's not surprising that you look at you can see this from the amount of boys that are on the street at night. Just not, who is actually telling them to come in? I'm talking about like 12, 13, in fact, sometimes even younger than that.
Wow.
On the street at 11, 12 at night. I mean, I don't know, but you ask a policeman, when the policeman picks up that son, and this might be a massive stereotype, I know, but ask any policeman you were in the force, they take that boy back home and they're taking them back to a single household.
Yeah.
There's no man in that house.
Yeah.
So that debate we can't have in England because somebody will turn around to you and say, what you're doing is you're already beating up on the single mother. And that's become a sacred thing now, the single mother. So, and they're looking at us now, all these men talking about all the same old thing, it's all against the women, it's all, and we're blaming them. And it's not that what I'm trying to get at with
You're blaming the fathers for not being there.
Yeah. And I'm also saying that the fathers should be allowed back in. Now, some of them say, well, whoa, what's going on here? Some of those men are abusive. Some of them may be, but not all of them. And they need access to that. And the other thing is, I think with this, is that it's actually, we need to be able to support those mothers. I get calls every week, because of what I do, from single mothers saying, I can't cope with this boy. Dr. Sewell, have you got any ideas? She's reached a point, especially when he's a teenager. Now, everybody knows this. Social workers, lawyers, politicians, they all know this. But nobody wants to go over that sacred line of saying that, look, we can't do this. Can we have some help here? You know, because we're saying that we are in the era of super women. They can do everything. They can go to work. They can raise girls. Yeah? They can also raise boys. They can do everything. So how dare you step over on that line? And I think that's where we are politically. That's where we kind of have a mature discussion on it. What will happen is you'll have a discussion and the women will turn around and say, you're just blaming us. You know, or it's one where it's not about this, it's about poverty, or it's about the fact that the boys haven't got, sort of youth centre to go to, or things like that, which is not the real reason why they're in this state of disruption. They're in this state of disruption because there isn't a restraining element at home.
And do you think a lot of the gang problems and the knife problems that we're seeing in London and elsewhere in the country now, is it down to that?
Yeah, I know that because I used to work for the Youth Justice Board, which was the arm in the society that looked after children who were in the youth offending area. Now, to be honest, that's only about 800 kids. It's not a lot of kids, you know, on the sort of real kind of serious end of it, you know, and those children in the end, what I did was I kind of went round and just asked those boys, come on, tell me why are you here? What was the reason for the knife crime? And two things came out of that kind of interaction. Number one, there was an admission that at a point in their lives, the father leaving or not being there is this issue, yeah? And I think the other one, which was really interesting about their morality, was, and this actually was quite pertinent for black boys, was that a lot of them pleaded not guilty for their crime. So here is a boy, he's found, the knife is in the hand. The police has arrived. It's not as if they run away. The knife is in the hand. The blood, everything is all over him. You're a bang to rights, yeah? He reaches court and he pleads not guilty. And what happens in our justice system is if you plead not guilty, you get a longer sentence, because obviously you can't bargain. If you plead guilty, then obviously the judge will take that into consideration. So they're copying longer sentences. And I was quite intrigued to find out why it was that those boys were saying not guilty. Because all the boys I met in all those youth offending, every one of them was saying they're not guilty. What's going on? And I got it then. It wasn't that the police had got the facts wrong. They genuinely believed they were not guilty, because when the person disrespected them, the original offence for the knife crime, that is what they're referring to. They're saying that person actually did me so wrong, I was justified to kill him. So so what we've got is we've got kids locked up in this situation, men locked up, who haven't got any sense of the morality of what they've done. They actually still believe, no one's done any work on that. They actually believe that they were right. So they're actually literally not guilty because they were justified to stab them. That's when when they plead to the judge not guilty, that's what they're saying. They're saying, I'm not guilty. I was justified to do it. That's horrific.
It is.
It is.
You know what I mean? So in their heads, blood, that bit of it isn't a problem. The fact that at the dance, he stepped on my shoe or dissed my girlfriend or whatever it was, right, that was the crime.
Mm. See, as you're talking about it now, I think back to my childhood. I've been dissed in my childhood, right? As we all have.
You get dissed.
And you go to your dad, in my case, and you go, well, Dad, this is what happened. Like, what should I do? And he goes, well, just don't worry about it. The guy's a dick or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what a father gives you a sense of where the limitations are of your retaliation. Right?
Exactly. It's the moral development. What we're going down now is the moral development of those boys. The vacuum that's there. And I'll be honest, the mothers try. And here's another problem with this thing about the mothers. There is a significant amount of women who actually do really well with their boys and take them to the top universities, and they do well. And so what happens is when you have this conversation, they roll out and they say, well, look, what are you talking about? I had 5 boys and I sent them all to university. Super mum, you know. And but then I turn around and say, well, what about the 90% of other women who are not super mum, who haven't got that capacity? You know, what about them? And I think that's the problem we have. So the society is continually telling us that women can do it all and men are actually useless. I mean, that's really the message.
So how do we go about solving this?
I think that the issue for me is that the policies certainly around some of the settlements for boys when it comes to who has custodies in terms of the breakup of the family, we've got to review how this thing works for boys. Someone's got to kind of talk to some of those judges about that. I think there's an issue there in terms of, because often this happens in a family breakup that happens. The other bit is that I just think that I think that there should be a campaign. I think this is the mayor's office should be having a campaign about the fact that a lot of men, and it can be black or white men, should be taking responsibility of their kids and actually making that more a normal thing. What's happened sometimes in some black community, and we've had this in the Caribbean community, that it's actually a pride to sort of say, I've dropped 3 or 4 kids from all these different women, out of pride of my manhood, that I've dropped all these kids, and I'm not taking care of them. You know what I mean? And so what? Because the state can take care of them. Yeah. And that's the issue. And
those are the people who then fill the prisons.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what you need almost, like I said, a campaign to bring the father back, in a sense. Not in an oppressive, but this idea that actually make it not a mark of a manhood that you've got all these kids, but in fact, it's a good man is a man that takes care of his children, and almost like that campaign, in the heads of our boys, that's what is the expectation. At the moment, there's just nothing. We don't want to go there. So I would love the mayor, for example, to put out a poster campaign of I used to remember walking with my daughter with a buggy in the hand and walking around, and people would look at me, and it's a strange thing to do. But to me, it was a natural thing to do. I walk around. I brought that daughter. The mother carried her for 9 months. Yeah, but I'm part of that person. So I've got to be doing my share. You know what I mean? It doesn't. I wouldn't even think of anything otherwise. And it's just like, that kind of thing of what does a man look like? So a man would be seen, must be there with his, and I used to be other guys, it was great. We'd all be together with our buggies, all talking to each other, and it was like, and they would say the same thing. People would say, or people would come in and say, well done. What the crap's that? Well done. So it's like, or people look at it. The other thing, which is another interesting issue, is to do with child abuse. I think that there's a suspicion that men with younger children, it's not natural. So it's kind of, I remember when I was teaching a little boy in a nursery, a one-to-one. The mother wanted me to do private lessons, and she was the owner of the nursery. And then, of course, the mothers came in. What's this man doing in here? As if I was kind of I'm going to abuse their kids. Yeah. And so there's a kind of nervousness about men, and we've made that kind of a sort of thing about, you shouldn't be seen to, this thing about in the swimming pool, whatever. Should you be seen? I don't mean to taking pictures, but should you be swimming too close to the children? It's subconsciously you're thinking. A kid. I remember a little boy. I was walking around there. A little boy just come up to me in the train. I was in the train. Come up. His mum was. The boy just jumped off on me and started to hug me. And I think he mistook me for his dad. Yeah. And I was just like, and I felt really guilty because I said, well, what's going on here? There's a sort of second take you have to take sometimes as a man when you're around young. And we've got this sort of thing about, are you the sort of, Sutcliffe, are you kind of, and I just think we've got to kind of be, again, that normative thing. I think it's an English thing. I do think that we've got to get back to that kind of sense that we need the males back into play here,
And what has been the reaction by you going, fathers need to take responsibility, they need to look after their children. There can't be this attitude that, you just have, 3 or 4 kids from different mothers and all the rest of it. Has it been supportive?
No, I've found it quite, even in people I know, even in my own family, but we've had big debates about this. They keep saying to me, Tony, you're just oversimplifying it. I hate those words, oversimplifying it. It's so many, the problem around knife crime is so complex. It's poverty. It's that they didn't get a youth club. It's to do with teachers, and it's a whole range of things. And so, when people start doing that long list, shopping list, what they're really saying is, back to our thing again, it's experts who don't know. Yeah. See, so they're just giving you this long list because that means inaction. Because once the list starts going past 5 things, then you're really saying to that boy, look, we can't do anything for you. You know what I mean? And so what they're saying is that you've just come to this problem and you're just oversimplifying it by just saying it's about fathers, you know. Yet the evidence is clear for me that disproportionately, especially if a lot of black boys are involved in that's the issue that they face. And it's not that, it might be that knife crime isn't the problem. It might be that those boys are just unhappy, or they're in that vacuum, that moral vacuum, that means that they then commit that crime, you know. And so we've got to look at the underlying reasons why. One of the things that for me is the key to this is the way in which we tackled teenage pregnancy. That was a big social problem. I don't know about you, but in London, I used to remember the time, I'm sure it's up north as well, where you'd see all these teenage girls with these buggies walking around on the high street.
Yeah,
you don't see that anymore. You don't see that anymore, not to that extent, especially in London. In parts of Hackney, we've almost cracked that. So what did they do to develop that? Well, two things. Girls got a much more positive image about themselves, and lots more, you know, and it also coincided to a certain extent with some of the positives around social media as well. So that, you know, it wasn't cool. It's not cool anymore to be a girl with a buggy walking around town. That just doesn't cut it anymore. And the other thing was that it was compulsive contraceptives and not telling the parents. That worked. That seemed to work as well. So, you know, the injection went in, and the girls, you know, that's just stopped them, you know. And I think those two policy things that we focused on dealt with that problem. You know what I mean? It wasn't too, we didn't say, oh, it's too complicated, you know. And equally, I think with the issue for boys, we need a similar kind of thing around how boys and men see themselves, how fathers see themselves, and making it not cool to be a deadbeat dad, almost going after them really, and then really kind of almost in a sense sort of saying to the boys themselves that, look, here are some positive role models of what you can be like as a man, you know. And putting that around them. So it's a counter narrative to the gangs. You've almost got to go counter to what, you know, the other thing. And then you'll get a positive outcome. I mean, it's that kind of policy thing that you need to start engineering around those young people and supporting those single mothers. I'm not saying to the single mothers, you've got to stay with those men, but at least do what some of the women do, at least call out for help, and don't say you can do it all. You know, that doesn't mean that that doesn't put your feminism radar lower. It just means that you're saying that, look, I need some support here, you know, and we should be able to support those boys. So I do think that we've done it before, and we can do it for young men.
And Tony, I wanted to, this is one of the areas that I really wanted to talk to you about, because it always rears its head with the police. It's stop and search. Now, a lot of people say that it's a racist policy. Stop and search for our global audience is where they police stop young men, mainly young black men, and search them for knives and all the rest of it. Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? Where do you stand on it, and why?
I mean, my view on it is quite an interesting area here, because it's like we've moved full circle with this. So, for example, you get two voices on this. You get people saying, "Oh, stop and search is bad and it's oppressive. It goes only from one community." But then when there is a knife crime, the police are blamed because they're not there in it. They say, "Where are the police?" You know, and you usually get that from the victim's side. You know, so suddenly we've got a shift in this, and it's more towards saying that, okay, we need more police. So my view on it is, I think knife crime does need quite specific policing, but I just think it doesn't need saturating policing. What used to happen in the 70s and 80s was that a crime would be committed, then every black man in the radius of about 5 miles was stopped and searched, just because, you know, you're just. I mean, that just caused mass problem. I think the police have got enough intelligence on this one to be able to do some targeted things where they know where those criminals are and where they're hanging out. And I think they should use stop and search in that more intelligent way. So I do think you need it, but it just needs to be done better.
You know, coming back to the fatherlessness thing, one of the things I found very worrying in the piece that you had in the Times, you talking about the fact that you're trying to get this message out there that fatherlessness is a problem. And the pushback is that a lot of the white politicians and other people you talk to, they don't want to raise this issue. They don't want to deal with it because of fear of being called racist.
Yeah.
Right. So how? And I can't wrap my head around that. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I think that it was even worse when I used to come out with stuff around exclusion from schools and boys, and say that black boys, and say that look, this issue isn't necessarily about racism, but it's actually about some other things going on in the home, in the peer group, and we've got to tackle this, you know. And I think equally with the knife crime issue, although I think I must admit there's less of a sense now that people are. I think there's a more willingness, I think, to go to that area now because of the numbers are so clear that it is disproportionately black boys that are involved in this. However, I do think that when we come to the solutions, that aiming this, I mean, and my friend David Lammy is a classic example. I mean, David in 2012, he was before me. He said, you can just go online, just tap in David Lammy knife crime, and up will come all these articles about him saying black homes need black fathers. I mean, he states that, you know, and yet now it's sort of not politically kind of so correct to do that. I hear he's rowing back a bit on that, you know, he's not coming out. So you get that sort of sense that there's a sensitivity around this, and nobody wants to come out and state that as an issue.
Why?
And I think it's also who says it. I think it's because there is a focus on the victim. What it is they're saying that the thing that always helps us out is the white male. If we can find anything to hook it on him, then it's a get out of jail card for us. Yeah. So therefore,
right, you're screwed, mate.
So you know, in this particular instance, you know, what way? Wait a minute. You know, we cannot blame the victim here. It's got to be something to do with him, or at least his measures. So it's to do with Tory austerity. It's to do with the fact there isn't a youth club. It's to do with the police, you know, and the way they see themselves. It's to do with white teachers excluding them from schools. Anything and everything, but not the home. And I think that's the problem. That's really where it is. So, but once you start going back into the home, you talk about agency. Then you're talking about responsibility of those communities, and that's the difference. You see, now nobody wants to take that, especially if you're a politician who's been kind of almost put up on the basis that I am here to protect you from that horrible world, the wolves out there that are coming to get you. So therefore, my narrative has always got to come back to the fact that you're oppressed, not for the fact that the oppression might be something to do with what's gone on in your home, yeah, or another type of oppression that you might be perpetuating yourself. No, you can't go there, and that's where we've become stuck. But what I think this issue has come up is that, as I said, I think that particularly black boys, they're a problem for that kind of rhetoric. They confound that because they, as those boys say, look, the biggest issue for me was the fact that my old man left, or he wasn't there, or downstairs I was busy kind of refitting an air gun so that it could be used as a gun while my daughter was upstairs my sister was upstairs doing her work, and my dad, or the dads of the three of us, the three different dads, just were not here. That's the reality that I face, you know. And so for me, that's where it lies, and so it's difficult for communities to come back and say, well, we've got to try and sort this out ourselves.
You see, what I don't understand, there's a guy in America, Larry Elder, I don't know if you're familiar with him, right? And he has some interesting points along the same lines that you make. But he's a guy who just talks, right? He's a radio host. He's very articulate, very good, but he talks, right? But you've proven it through the work that you do. And still people are afraid to take... There should be hundreds of generating geniuses around the country.
I think that there should be. And I think that people are waking up to it. But I think that it's a harder one. I mean, what's also happened is that here's another thing about generating genius that makes it a little bit different, and people kind of don't get it a bit, is that what it's trying to do is saturate the mindset of that community with young people that are doing very well. It's a kind of, almost like a kind of counterintuitive thing, because what you usually do in policies is you tend to say, we're going to stack all our resources on the very few kids that are causing all this disruption. Now, admittedly, when they kill somebody, that's a massive disruption. So you've got to do something. But what we're saying is that actually what you need to do is you need to change the narrative around that group. That's what we did with the teenage girls. And so therefore you actually may be needing to sort of go after, as I say, children who are, and making sure that there is a story for them. What's quite interesting is that the kids on my program come from the same schools that the kids who commit knife crime come from. They come from the same schools. So it's not like they're going off to Eton or Harrow or something like that. The same estates, the same schools, yet they're ending up at the top universities. So that is powerful. You see what I mean? Because you're saying, well, look, wait, the same money, the same lack of youth clubs or whatever, austerity, that same, and to a certain extent, same lack of fathers. And that's quite interesting as well, you know, in their homes. And yet one group is doing well, another is. And the other one that confounds it all is girls. At the moment, the group that is doing best in London are girls from a West African background. And they're doing really well in school. So what you've got in some homes, you've got the girl upstairs busy doing her work, going off to top university, and the boy downstairs getting ready for prison. And that is happening in a lot of black homes. Two pathways for the same kid in the same household. And so that's what you're saying is absolutely right. That in fact, what you need then is something that's going to tackle the real core of the problem, you know, not pussyfoot around it, which is really what's been happening in the past. And it's because we're not allowing ourselves, and this is probably this is the most honest and open conversation I've ever had with any media on this issue. And I've never heard people talk about it openly, because there's always this, what should I say the right thing, you know, and all that, and so we never get to it.
Well,
but it's amazing what you say. I mean, what part of this? I mean, this is is white guilt, where people, especially being a white man, you just go, I want to ask this question, but is it racist if I ask this question? Am I making, just a general assumption about black people, black men in general? Am I going to offend? Am I going to get upset? And there's also a selfish part of you, one little self-preservation element where you go, well, I don't want to address that because it's just too difficult and too challenging a subject.
Yeah. And I think that bit about it being too difficult and challenging a subject is the one that, to me, gets in the way. But yeah, you're right. There's a lot of guilt running around this thing that's really interesting. And guilt, in a way, is difficult. I'm having difficulties with even films and stories that keep running the guilt story, to the point where because I think that the narrative that says, all these people did this to me is interesting. And I think to remind people, and I started off by telling you a story of that in that room with that journalist, so I'm not unaware of the kind of difficulties that people have in terms of relating to other groups. And women should know that. This is what is frustrating for me, is that where I see women not kind of standing together with me on this, is that they almost can, I see their kind of thing as very similar to black boys, and we talked about this in the sense of obsession with the body. The whole thing about surveillance or whatever, lack of opportunities, all these things, and then agency, the ability to sort of see opportunities and seize it and go for it yourself. They have similar problems, and yet they have very little empathy with that, because what happens is they just still go for the default position that, in the end these are boys, and in the end you feel like they don't even like boys. And I get a sense that that's almost what's going on here, that our society doesn't like little boys. I mean, there's a kind of sense that they get in the way. Remember, if you're a boy, you're likely to have mum at home, her friends, then you go into school, you're going to have a female teacher, and the whole environment, you hardly see a man. Let me give you something that's really interesting. You can go to some primary schools now, and it's happened to me on a number of occasions. You go into the primary school, and suddenly all these little boys start running up towards you. It's quite scary. It's almost like you're Santa Claus. You go in there, and it's like, oh man, they haven't seen a man.
Yeah.
And they think that they secretly think you're going to be their teacher. That's it. But they're disappointed because you're just visiting, you know.
You should teach them for a while.
They're running up to you and they're talking to you. They kind of, because if you sit down with some of those boys, they actually do not have any interaction with any male adult authority.
Yeah,
that's right.
None.
That's crazy. Well, Tony, it's like you said yourself, it's been a very honest and a very, very interesting chat. We really thank you for coming on, for the work you're doing. And like I said, I hope that as part of this conversation and other media interviews that you do, there are 100 generating geniuses around the country eventually.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure. The last question we always ask.
It's one which is, what is the thing that people aren't talking about but really should be at the moment?
Well, I think we've touched it. One of the things it's got to be that the issue about fathers and men really in the society. In England we've got to have a proper grown-up debate about that and come to terms with that. And I think that just debating it honestly will take us further.
Okay. Well, that's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for coming on, Tony. As always, follow us at TriggerPod on all the social media. We're on PayPal if you enjoyed the show and want to keep supporting it, as you have been, many of you, on Patreon as well for now. And thank you very much. We will see you in a week's time from now with another brilliant episode.
Absolutely. Like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. Click the bell icon, which will tell you every time one of our videos is released. And if also as well, you could rate us on iTunes. We'd be really grateful. And if you like us and you're a bit embarrassed,
no one likes us.
No one likes it. It's true because we're
they like the show. They don't like us.
Yeah, it's true. Or because you think where you're worried about being judged because you're a Nazi or whatever else. Then just tell somebody in secret without people listening. Spread the word. But guys, thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.
See you in a week's time.